Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Blue Brothers Sportscast. I'm going to be doing one episode a week now this year, so we're going to talk about last week's game a little bit briefly before we dive into previewing the next game and next opponent. So let's talk about Fresno State. Fresno State was not a team to sleep on. We knew that going into the game that they were a decent team and that they've been coming off several successful seasons in a row. But at the end of the game, when it mattered most, the Michigan offense and the Michigan defense stepped up when they needed to. Now, I'm not sure how comfortable you were with that. It was definitely a high stressful game for a majority of it, but they got the job done. So Fresno State was able to find gaps in Michigan's secondary that they were able to capitalize on. Sometimes there were blown coverages, and other times they were just giving too much cushion. Now, they were able to get through that game this past weekend, but that is certainly not something that is going to work against the next team with their prolific quarterback and their passing game. That is just one of the many areas that they are going to have to lock down on. Now, one of the things that was most surprising to me and one of the things that was most concerning to me was how the O-line performed and the lack of effectiveness in the running game. That has been Michigan's identity, and it didn't really seem like they wanted to switch gears to identify more in the passing game. It just seemed that the running game wasn't being effective, so they had to go with more passing. With where this team is now, that is not going to work very well and be very effective against teams like Texas this upcoming week. But it is only one game, so we will see how that proceeds as the year goes on. Take comfort in that this Michigan team has been known for several years now to progressively get better throughout the year. Definitely some things to take comfort in. Mullings looked great as the second running back. Honestly, he looked more prolific than Edwards did, but we all know well enough that Edwards is the type of player that shows up when he is needed, and especially in those big games. And also, it's only one game so far. But what about Dominic Svada? Talk about how awesome it is to have another reliable kicker, connecting with 45, 53, and 55-yard field goals in his debut. Love seeing it so much. He was definitely one of my top performers from this game. And then Colson Loveland, just fantastic to have as that anchor in the receiving core because he is so dependable. No, he had that one key drop, but really throughout the rest of the game, he was their go-to guy, and he did a fantastic job. And of course, just expecting more from him throughout the season. So all in all, one game in, kind of a scary performance. It is what it is. Lots of things to build on. This staff is not going to let these guys rest easy. They also are restless too. They know that there is more to be expected from them. So we'll see how they progress through this week into game 2. So after that week 1 victory, Michigan is 28-0 at home in the month of September, dating all the way back to 2015. Now, if the Michigan team that played the last 10 minutes of football shows up, then we've got ourselves a ball game. But this week is up against one of the quarterbacks that is in conversations for the Heisman, Ewers, for the Texas Longhorns. They played their debut at home against Colorado State. Colorado State, a team that isn't really expected to do a whole lot. So say what you want to about comparing Colorado State to Fresno State. I've seen a lot more positive press about Fresno State and their capabilities. Still not saying that Michigan should be super proud of that performance, but just for some context. Ewers was 20 for 27 on passing with 3 touchdowns, 1 interception for a total of 260 yards. Ewers sometimes being a little bit greedy, maybe you might even say a little bit cocky, and then trying to do too much, and that's when he can make mistakes. So something that the defense can maybe focus on when they play against them this weekend. They like to divide things up between their 2 running backs, Gibson and Blue, and they were both pretty effective this past week. But what's most impressive for them is their receiving core. They have Wingo, Cook II, Bond, and Golden, all in their receiving group. They had 200 yards between all of them on just 15 catches against Colorado State. Now, you might recognize Bond, Isaiah Bond, formerly of Alabama, who was the star who got them the win above Auburn last season. He transferred to Texas during the offseason. And so he is very effective and quite the electric player. So the secondary will have its handful, to say the least. Now, Texas is the type of team that likes to play sideline to sideline to stretch the defense out. And while the Michigan defense did not play a perfect game last week, I do think that they will be able to answer the call and play against the Texas Longhorn offense. But the Michigan offense, that's a different story. Before diving into that, a few more numbers from Texas against Colorado State. Texas wound up going 6 for 12 on third downs. They had a total of 545 yards, 355 passing, and 190 rushing. Their defense didn't have the most impressive day. Even though they had a shutout, they were only able to get 5 total tackles for loss, while Colorado State was able to put up 5 tackles for loss as well and a sack on top of it. The Texas defense with the shutout only allowed a total of 192 yards, which was 74 passing and 118 rushing. Now, this is not a team that cannot be stopped. They had a possession where they got the ball on a turnover on Colorado State's 30-yard line, and they had to resort to kicking a field goal. So it's not like they're unbeatable and they just seem so impressive because they did this shutout in their first game. They are going on the road to the big house. And so Michigan needs to just play their best game to keep up with them and have their best shot at potentially taking the win. Not saying that Fresno State is the best rushing team and it's only 1 week, but the Michigan team does seem like their defense will be able to handle the rushing attack rather well. They held Fresno State to 9 total rushing yards, and that is what they'll be able to go up against this Texas team. So it's really going to be coming down to the secondary, how much pressure they can get on Ewers, and if they can force him into any mistakes. I think if they can move him around a lot, maybe get their hands in his face a bit, that they'll be able to do that. They'll be able to have short drives and give the ball back to the offense for more opportunities to put points on the board. But as I said, what about the Michigan offense? Now, in the last game, they used Warren and Orji. I myself am not a fan at all of the 2 quarterback system. I don't know exactly how this is going to go. I don't know if they're going to do it more. I expect from what we saw that you will see more of it, that they will split snaps even more in game 2 than they did in the first game. Say what you want to with it. It can be really difficult because you're then going to be taking away opportunities from one quarterback, basically Warren. And if he's not in his groove, you're not going to let him get in stride if you're taking the ball away from him to give it to Orji. Sometimes it doesn't have that big of an effect, but other times it can be detrimental. Also, the other thing too is 2 different quarterbacks play differently and the timing is different. And so if you're doing routes with one quarterback, then you switch to another quarterback, it is not going to be in sync as you practice through the week. And so that is just a more difficult situation that you put the offense in for some key plays. It might have a benefit, but it also might be detrimental. Like I said, though, the offensive line is going to be key and they really need to step up. They need to protect the quarterback, but they also need to make holes for the running backs. Michigan lives and dies by the run. That's what their identity has been, and I still think that that's what their identity is going to be. And so they have to be able to do that to be able to compete in this game. And so if we do not see an improvement from the offensive line and the running backs, then this is going to be a long game on Saturday. And so that is when this brings me to my conclusion. Michigan is the type of team that builds throughout the year. Michigan has not had a big test this early on in the season for quite some time. And so I was predicting an 11-1 regular season for Michigan, and this was actually the game that I had in question because it's just so early for this team that has lost so much to the draft last year and to graduation. So I'm really not feeling it for the Michigan Wolverines this weekend. I would love for them to prove me wrong, but I just don't know if they're going to be able to rebound off of that first week and make enough improvements to be able to compete against Ewers and a team like the Texas Longhorns. I think that they'll give it a valiant effort, But in the end, I don't think they're going to have enough to be able to clinch a win for the Wolverines. My score prediction for the game is Michigan 20, Texas 34. And I will say this again. I want to be proven wrong. I hope that I am proven wrong. But that is the thing where if this game was played later in the season, then I really feel like they could get this win for the team. But it's so fast and so quick in this season. And what we saw off of week one to be able to change enough in 1 week for this game at home against the Texas Longhorns, I don't quite see it happening. Go ahead and leave a comment. Let me know your thoughts, but definitely let me know your score predictions because I would love to hear what you have to say. Again, won't know anything until Saturday. It's going to be a long time waiting, but it will be a noon kickoff this week instead of a night game. So until then, as always, go blue.